Hi, and welcome back to the broadcast. Today we have a grad student and an undergrad student, both specializing in political science and political philosophy and have a good sense of the national debate. So we have with us Ben. Ben, hi. You're an undergrad student and you're majoring in
Mechanical
and you
engineering.
have a mechanical engineering and you have a really good view of politics.
Well, I'm interested in politics, as just on the side. But I mean, I'm interested in it enough that I
You've done
study it every day.
a lot of reading, and you've been really involved in politics in the College Republicans. Is that right?
Yes.
Great. And Tanner, you are a PhD candidate and graduate student at the University of Washington in
Behavioral neuroscience.
behavioral neuroscience. Okay, and you've had a long history in politics and political philosophy and theory, right? Background and all that.
Yeah, I've done some extensive reading of various books steeped in political philosophies, ranging all the way from anarchism to communism. And I've been interested in politics since even before I could vote, because politics influences everything we do in society.
So, well, let's just get into it. Let's start off with, we have two good voices here on both sides. On the right, inside of conservatism broadly construed, we have two voices here. Well, you might take issue with that, but we'll get into that. We have sort of a classical liberal, radical classical liberal, and more of a Romney conservative, pro-business. Ben, how would you characterize your general place where you come from?
I would say that I'm generally conservative on most issues. I'd say I have kind of a libertarian core in some ways, but kind of moderated with what I would call not expediency. That's not the word I would use, but I would say practicality.
Okay, good. We'll get into more of what that actually means. But let's go ahead and how would you characterize, Tanner, how would you characterize the school of thought that you come from?
I would say that my core ideology stems from the philosophies of voluntarism and somewhat then the anarcho-capitalist background. But I would characterize myself as more of a classical liberal. I do think there's a role for government. But I'm definitely both economically and socially liberal, which is why I do have issue with being characterized on the right, because I'm liberal in both ways.
Okay, that's good. There's a lot of distinctions and debates going about all that. Let's get into it then. Let's start off with the first issue, guys. What's the trying to bring about some solidarity between those who are trying to conserve classical liberalism and liberty and freedom and limited government, which both of us agree, all of us agree here, both of you guys agree. How would we go about talking about what we should do about the role of government in the economy and business, in the private sector, and in society? Should the government have little role, a lot of role, no role at all? What's the advantages? You might say there's what?
I would say that there's a very, very limited role for the government in the realm of business and the economy as a whole. Certainly, I don't think that the government should be intervening in terms of if a business is failing to bail them out or anything along those lines. But I do think there is a role for some government regulation when it comes to issues such as safety and protecting people's rights, because I think one of the legitimate uses of governmental force is to protect the rights of its citizens, which are guaranteed in the social contract, which in the United States is the Constitution.
Okay, so protect some rights. What about... so back to me. So what do you think about the role in business and economy? Can the involvement of government help? Let's ask you, Ben, first. Can the role of government be increased in the private sector to help the economy?
Well, I think that the way that the government helps the economy is providing the environment for business to be successful. Government doesn't create net jobs. The private sector does. So the best thing that the government can do in general is just get out of the way of business. Now, we need some government. I mean, back in the old days, what people used to do is they would put a factory right on the river. because the easiest way to get rid of all their waste and their chemicals and everything was to dump it right in the river, because then they wouldn't see anymore, go down the river. Now we all know that that would just be terrible for our environment. That's why we've passed regulations that keep people from doing things like that. I think that what we need to do is we need to look at, we need to protect the environment. We need to ensure that, you know, a businessman doesn't get a monopoly on an entire industry, right? But there's a limited role for the government.
So Ben, the government can, so humans, if they're acting freely, as a radical libertarian might say, will result in bad things that would be somewhat harmful to the society on the whole?
No, that's not what I would say. I would say that people in general are good, and that's the whole reason that our Constitution was set up the way it was. That's why we believe in people. So you kind of have to ask yourself this question: do you believe in people, or do you believe in government? The Democrats, for example, what they believe in is government. They believe that a few people who you can trust, right, are going to run the government and everything's going to be fine, because you can't trust everybody else to run their own lives. And from my perspective, what you should do is we should have the people big and the government small. The people should have lots of freedom, lots of power, because in general people are good, and in general governments are bad. Not because governments are bad intrinsically, but because whoever's in power wants to have more power.
So it sounds like you would suggest from those premises that less government, less government involvement,
less government in general.
Why not no government?
Well, the reason we need government is just like Tanner said. We need to have like police force, right? If people are attacking each other, if you have someone committing crimes against another person, the best thing to do is to have the government there to prosecute the individuals that commit crimes, to prevent crime. And you also need to have the government in some place, like I said, to prevent monopolies, because monopolies are really against the way the free market system is supposed to work, because then people can charge whatever they like for their goods. And then also to have some sort of environmental regulations to just make sure that we have an environment, you know.
Okay, so you're saying the government should be involved to do a few things. How would you characterize what the government should be involved in to do?
All right, so there's one thing.
And feel free to jump in at any time and so we disagree with and so forth.
Well, the number one thing I think, well, there's two major things I think that the government needs to really be involved in. And I'm not saying, well, I'll just be more specific. I think that the government needs to be involved in national security, so the military, and in like the police force and everything.
So things that
security,
private sectors people can't do themselves.
Yep. And then I think the second thing that's really critical that the government provide is education. Now, my personal belief is that we should have more private education, so like charter schools and everything. But I think that what we should have is the opportunity for anyone to go to a private school. Right now, if you're from a low-income bracket and you want to send your kids to a private school, you can't do that because you don't have enough money to pay for your kids to go to a private school. But you can send your kids to a public school. So what's happening is a lot of parents with lots of money are pulling their kids out of public schools and putting them in private schools. And the public schools are suffering as a result with not having those parents with lots of resources there to help out the school. So what we really need to do is we need to have more private schools and have all the private schools funded like through a charter system by the government. So what would happen is you'd have a system that's run by the free market, but you still have everyone getting a free education. Right now, and that would be an ideal system.
Okay, good. Let's come back to that one sec. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back to that. I want to get both of your objections to the liberal, progressive perspective on this. All right,